Welcome. I hope you enjoy the analysis of 1.13. SPGs have always had their own place in World of Tanks, the shithouse, and they've seen many changes that have affected their gameplay. And every single time we change them, they're still fucking annoying. We've lost our minds changing them over and over and over and over again. And we can't get it right. We can't. So, we're going to change them again. That's the strategy. A few months ago, we suggested several new mechanics for both artillery and its opponents. After testing them together with you, we've come a long way. Now, we're ready to introduce all these changes into the game. We're ready to change them again, because we've changed them many, many, many times, and you still hate them. So we're going to change them one more time. I've got an idea. Why don't we just do this? Why don't we just make this change? 1 SPG per game, per side. Done. Close the book on SPGs. Then they'll still be annoying, but there'll only be one of them. Klaus, where did you learn to be so smart? Did you go to Moscow University? In anticipation of the release of Update 1.13, let's take a closer look at the new features and how these mechanics will work. Artillery and HE shells, important changes. I guess we should watch this. Let's do it.
Artillery and high explosive shells are the two things that have been on the minds of tankers. It took several large-scale sandbox tests to decide how they would look in the future, and
I thought what was on the minds of tankers was new maps! We want new maps! Not HE changes! New maps!
most importantly, how they would feel. The thing is, these changes are important. They affect complex systems, and this entails consequences. Both separate and combined tests of HE shells and artillery were conducted.
They've got a British guy to do
this. Vacuum, but in close cooperation with players.
Hey, Doug.
Now that the hard work is finished, all the changes are ready to be added to the game.
We've done the hard work.
In the wake of Update 1.13, it's time to delve into the topic and figure out what awaits us all.
Oh, let's figure out what the shit show will be. Righto.
Throughout the history of World of Tanks, artillery has changed many times, and sometimes drastically. New changes are largely aimed at decreasing the amount of stun in battles. And this is clear to anyone who's been on the receiving end of artillery at least once. The less stun, the longer the vehicles and nerves of their commanders live on the battlefield.
Less stun. You're gonna stun less.
Now the therapy course includes new tools to counter SPG. My all-knowing colleague will tell you about them.
Let's start with the simplest and most noticeable change. The brighter artillery shell traces are now clearly seen in the sky. They help you understand three things. First, artillery has fired, well, in case you didn't figure that out immediately. Second, approximately where it fired from. And third, where and how the shell flew. If you put the pieces of this very important information together, you will understand where you can hide and where you shouldn't go. The initial point of tracer display is calculated randomly along the trajectory of the artillery shot. At the same time, the tracer appears at least 10 meters from the SPG. Putting it simply, it doesn't show the exact position of the artillery, but attentive tankers can benefit from it even not having all the cards in their hands.
The impact points of SPG shells on the mini-map will allow the monitoring of artillery actions and help work out tactics. It's been always useful to look at it, but now there's even more reasons to do so.
A marker in the shape of a circle with a dot at the center appears on the minimap at the point of impact of the enemy shell. It disappears after 10 seconds, but it's long enough to take note of it. If you see one explosion or tracer near you while there's another impact marker on the other side of the map, this means both artilleries are reloading. So you have a window of opportunity to change position or attack without fear of a sudden artillery strike.
While tracers and impact points...
My God, great Scott! There's going to be circles on the map now, and when there's multiple circles, you have the opportunity to escape.
require your attention, sound detection is more about your reaction. This is a completely new commander's perk that warns you about incoming enemy artillery shells.
What?
If your vehicle is in the impact area at the moment when artillery fires, you will see a special indicator showing the direction of fire. You need to act immediately after sound detection activates. Yes, it doesn't guarantee you'll completely avoid damage, but
So
it
you-
helps
you
reduce
can-
it, sometimes significantly.
SPGs
a
are
slow
fucked.
tank, and it's almost always a well-armored
So as soon as you
tank.
hear the sound,
Won't
just
have
start
time
moving.
to leave the impact
Or
area,
change-
but that's not required.
As soon as you hear the sound, then whatever you're doing, change what you're doing. If you're going straight, turn right. If you're turning right, turn left. If you're backing up, go forward. So SPGs are fucked. But is that a skill? You have to train your crew in that. What a waste of a skill, though. Eh? Would you want to use that?
It's enough to turn your hull when playing, for example the E100, and expose your thicker parts. This alone will help significantly. Faster vehicles will have time to hide behind cover and decrease the amount of burst damage, or even avoid it completely.
It is also worth mentioning that sound detection won't activate if your vehicle rolls into the enemy shell trajectory by accident, provided that the distance to the point of impact is more than 75 meters. If the vehicle is
If you're-
within this radius, the tanker will
You
see
can
the
still
sound
get
detection
trolled.
indicator.
Another new feature.
Oh,
I
another
haven't
dude.
finished yet. The other case when sound detection doesn't work is when a tank rolls into the impact area after the artillery has fired.
Boom!
This can happen to a vehicle that is moving fast.
Thanks.
Okay.
Now, when we've dealt with this topic, let's talk about the artillery itself. The first change is seen right away.
Where?
3 shells in the arsenal. This is not just another icon at the bottom of the screen.
Let's give
This
them
is an
AP shells
important
again.
new tactical feature.
They
All
had
3
them, we
shells
took them
are
away.
different.
They had them, we
Each
took
has
them
its
away.
own
They had them,
strengths
we took
and
them away.
purpose.
Now
The
they can have them
first
back.
is the familiar standard high explosive shell. It's the simplest to use. It causes damage to several opponents within the burst radius. This is the only shell that causes stun. There's one problem with this. It doesn't cause critical damage to internal modules and crew if it does not penetrate.
But it doesn't need to. A standard shell is like a pair of everyday sneakers. You don't think much when putting them on. The range of use is wide.
A standard. This must be a translation from Russian, right?
Yeah, a standard shell is just like Yuri when you put on your flip-flops and go for a ride on bicycle with flip-flops. You don't think which flip-flop you wear.
And they translated in a standard shell is like putting on sneakers. You don't think when you put this. Wow. I never thought of it that way.
Wide but clear. A target moves fast. An enemy hides behind cover. Several tanks are close to each other. The choice is obvious in all those cases.
The second artillery shell
Okay,
is an
second shell.
alternative shell. This is also a high explosive shell, but with obvious differences from a standard shell.
It's more
It doesn't
expensive.
cause stun to the enemy at all, and its burst radius is half the size.
Oh.
However, its armor penetration and damage are a bit higher than those of a standard shell.
Just what you need when firing at a slow target. And if it doesn't have much armor, that's even better. Standard and alternative shells are the foundation of artillery
Why would you
firepower.
use that? So if you miss,
These
you
are
don't
the most
stun, you
used
don't do
shells that
splash.
suit the majority of combat situations.
So it's the go fuck yourself
Until there's a
RNG
big,
shell.
heavy, slow tank
You
focused
click
on
and then
survival
Wargaming
in your
decides
sights.
whether it hits or not.
This is when it takes the stage. Its Majesty armor-piercing shell, the third.
Well, in some cases it can be a heat shell. By its purpose, this is a tactical shell with the highest armor penetration.
Russian SPGs will get heat shells.
I'm just translating.
If it penetrates armor, it causes more damage than any HE shell with non-penetration. For obvious reasons, it doesn't cause stun and has no burst radius.
It sounds like a situational superhero shell that comes to the rescue when regular HE shells fail to perform, like when you need to fire at a tank with a spall liner. But what is its true effectiveness?
You know what it is? the ones that have the splash and the stun is going to be the regular shell, and the other 2 shells are for when you're playing the game and you accidentally load one of these, and then Wargaming decides whether you hit or not. And if you're losing the game at the end, you'll miss, and if you're winning the game at the end, you'll hit and you'll penetrate. This is an RNG shell, right? So, okay. SPGs have armor-piercing shells and weird shells that... the second shell is weird. I don't know.
Can ricochet or miss the
I'd
target.
probably just use the
At a
number
first
1
glance,
shells
there's
unless
little
I was
point in it.
sure I was going to hit.
Well, that's your opinion, but I base my decision on the facts.
Facts.
Let's do an experiment.
All right.
2 60 TP twins and 2 SPGs with different ammo loads.
Yes, let's do it. Because this is what
As you
happens
can
in battle.
see, high explosive shells don't always hit the target and cause significant damage. For a series of shots, the damage with armor-piercing shells is comparable to high explosive shell damage.
The numbers are beautiful, but emotions are important as well. It's very satisfying when you hit a heavy tank with an AP shell, penetrate it, and cause damage. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
From this shocking news, let's proceed to other important details. Each of the 3...
It just sounds to me like there's 3 ways you can get trolled now. There's 3 different ways you can get trolled. And remember, the enemies, when you fire that AP shell, they'll hear doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and they'll get out of the way. So it's the 3 ways you can get trolled. AP shells only do damage 1 shot in 9, says someone in the chat. Yeah, you have to hit. But if it's one of those games where you're only going to get 1 shot or 2 shots, the guy's not going to sit there for you to fire your 9 shots. You got to make your shots count. It's a troll ammunition. The AP shells are troll ammunition. Maybe you want to just load it when at the end of the game when you're in the bush and you're going to shotgun someone at the end. Maybe. I don't know.
shells travel at their own speed and trajectory. It's important to keep it in mind when planning your next shot. A standard shell has the most curved, most comfortable trajectory, but its velocity doesn't impress. An alternative HE shell travels faster, but at a less curved trajectory. The trajectory of AP and heat shells is flatter, which is not always convenient. However,
they've completely changed everything. I think SPGs are really screwed. But okay, you can see the AP shell has the lower trajectory. So the AP shell is going to be good for shotgunning someone at the end when they're close to you and mid to close range, and you want to smack them, and you got a high chance of hitting. You're going to use the top shell, the regular HE shell, most of the time. The second one, I don't know when you'd use it, but anyways.
However, they can't be matched in speed, and this is important when taking lead of the target.
The key to artillery success is the combination of all 3 shell types.
The key to artillery success is
say that one
3
of them is
things.
the best.
R,
They are
N,
tools that allow
G.
to adjust for the
All
ever-changing
3
battle
types.
situation.
Russian,
Using
number,
only 1 shell
generator.
type is like driving at night with your lights off. It's strange at the very least, but most importantly, it's dangerous. When the enemy tanks are preparing to attack, it's reckless to aim at one particular tank to fire an AP shell. It's more logical to hit several vehicles at once with an HE shell, preferably with stun.
Shit on all of them!
But the long reload, it doesn't motivate to switch shells. What do you do about it?
This is where the revamped intuition skill comes in handy. The already loaded shell can be switched to another in no time. Well, you can see the precise time under the reload timer. The fully trained intuition accelerates the reload by 60%. The commander bonus provides 6% more. With the Brothers in Arms perk, food consumables, improved ventilation, including the one for bonds, and directives, you will be able to switch the shell even quicker. However, if you switch a shell during reload, intuition won't work, and the full reload of the next shell will start. If you do everything in time, you will be able to react to the changing situation.
Don't worry.
Of course, you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask.
We
Intuition works in the same way for other vehicle types.
That have 3 guns.
Here, you should take note
Each
of
gun has
one
different
nuance.
shell type.
Different shell flight trajectories make the gun re-aim after switching shell types to fire at the same spot. So, if an SPG is parked improperly, the gun aims in 2 planes at once. Due to that, the aiming circle widens like a first grader's horizons. You just need to remember this and accept it.
You just need to remember and accept when you change shell, you're screwed. You must accept this.
Finally,
No
a
fun
few
for
words
you.
about aesthetics and new functional features of the interface.
Aesthetics.
The currently loaded shell type and its travel time are displayed right next to the artillery
Travel
aim.
time? Okay.
The color shows whether it can reach its destination or not.
For the British
If it's
ones,
red, the
they
chances
can't
are
reach
very
the
low.
destination.
If it's green, the shell can reach the target.
Yeah.
Also, you can now switch modes from top view to trajectory view by scrolling the mouse wheel.
Oh.
All these new features expand the range of possibilities for artillery and increase its adaptability. 3 shells in the arsenal help adjust to various combat situations. It doesn't matter how many vehicles are in your sights. The artillery will have the appropriate response in all cases. Reworked intuition will help react to the changed situation quicker.
I've got a
but
question.
at a
Hold on. Well, what about all the missions for artillery where all of them are based on number of stun seconds you've done, number of stun assists seconds? It's all about stunning in all these missions and all the campaigns. Are those, since there's less stun and some of the shells don't stun at all, are they all going to be reworked? Are all the mission things all different now, and or are they going to leave those so some of the missions will be impossible and they'll get to that in 2 years in patch 1.15 or something? Are the missions going to be reworked? Or how the hell are you going to do the stunning missions now? Some of those really high level stunning missions to get the reward tanks. Are you not going to be able to do them? And Wargaming is like, oh Yuri, we forgot missions. Let's put that on agenda. We will do that after the next 17 premium tanks we release. At 2023, we will. What's going to happen with the missions? That's my question.
Tankers are also in a winning situation because the amount of stun has reduced significantly.
Yes.
And this change is noticeable right away.
Yes.
From the elevated artillery, let's move to a more grounded topic of high explosive shells.
Okay, we're moving
This
on.
is the strangest shell type.
High explosive shells. It's strange.
It's clear with armor piercing and heat shells, but HE shells? HE shells are a different matter. When you join a battle in your super heavy tank, you want to feel confident,
Yes. I want to feel
especially
confident.
when you do it correctly. Take the right position. Roll out. Remember to angle, aim, and see hopelessness. Or not.
The thing is, the mechanic of causing high explosive damage has changed. Previously, HE shells caused damage by volume. This means that when an HE shell penetrated armor, it exploded inside, causing damage to the vehicle as well as to modules and crew members within the burst radius.
Sure.
If a shell didn't penetrate armor at the impact point, it detonated on the armor, and the mechanic looked for its thinnest part within the burst radius, and damage went through that spot.
Yes, this led to different consequences, mainly to unpleasant ones.
This led to a shit show. No one knew how much damage
But
you're
do
going to
the
do with
new
HE.
mechanics
Or is it just
drastically
a
change anything?
random
It's
number
hard to
generator?
believe. Shells are still shells.
Yes.
Those HE shells, these HE shells.
You have no idea about it yet, but you're already making assumptions. With the new mechanics, the picture changes completely. Now,
Completely.
a tank HE shell causes damage not just anywhere, but where it should. To be more precise, at the point of impact. When contacting armor, a shell tries to penetrate it. If it fails to do so, it detonates. An explosion outside causes spalling, with armor fragments breaking off inside the vehicle. That spalling causes damage to the vehicle, its internal modules, and crew. The fragments inside disperse at the same distance as shell fragments in the old system. The
So
difference
all the
is
crew
now
is
that there are
killed.
no fragments on the external side of the armor plate.
And here's a thing that our nagging friend forgot
So the
to
burst
mention.
radius is going to be really small.
The
You
fragments
can't-
are there.
You won't be able to shoot underneath some. Remember with some of the big HE shells, you could shoot the ground underneath some of the heavily armored tanks, and the splash radius would come up and impact the tank on the bottom, and you do a lot of damage. You could shoot a Type 5 heavy underneath and do 500 damage. Can't do that anymore because it looks like the splash radius is tiny. It only will splash. It doesn't splash. You saw the little diagram there. So I guess if you miss with HE now or come close, you'll do 0. There's no splash radius, I guess.
But they cause insignificant damage to the armor. If you fire at the ground near the tank, there'll be no damage.
There you go.
But you can still knock down a tree, destroy a house, or a small obstacle.
You can destroy house or small obstacle or tree, but if you shoot underneath tank, nothing happens. This is revised physics.
That's the dichotomy of a high explosive shell.
Dichotomy. Guys, that's the dichotomy. You can shoot down a tree, you can blow up a house, but if you shoot underneath a tank, nothing happens. It's a dichotomy.
Relax, guys. Things stay the same for you. The artillery has the old system of causing damage by volume and not at the impact point.
New rules mean one simple thing. If a shell reaches the armor, it will cause damage. The amount of damage depends on the armor plate at the impact point. The thicker it is, the lower the damage.
I wonder which tanks have a lot of thick armor. Which nation has lots of thick, even the light tanks? And I wonder what nation would benefit the most from this. So the answer eludes me at this point.
For well-armored vehicles that rely on the fact that they are difficult to penetrate from the front, the new mechanics allow them to use this advantage to the fullest. The time when you lost...
Notice they have no Russian tanks there in this example. There's no Russian tanks, guys. In this picture, there's no Russian tanks. You could put a T-54 lightweight in that row, and it's going to bounce HE shots now.
Hit points just because the opponent kept on using HE shells has passed. It's not that effective against well-armored vehicles anymore. Yes, you can still bounce off HE shells and avoid damage completely, but you can reduce it significantly by playing instinctively.
Guys, this is a complete, total, disastrous nerf to the British tech tree. All the British tanks that rely on HESH, the Death Star, the Shit Barn, all of the Centurion 7-1, all the ones that rely on HESH, right? All those light tanks that have, like the German Girlfriend Bulldog, the Hawk, a lot of those light tanks that have really good HE rounds, that relied on HE rounds to do some damage. This is a complete nerf to everything that has a good HE round, mainly the whole British tech tree. And a lot of other tanks that relied on shooting HE, sometimes to damage tanks, lightly armored tanks, and even to do some damage on what they couldn't pen with their regular or premium round. No? Shooting an IS-7, you couldn't do any damage with your regular round or your premium round, so you shoot some HE.
Your hull here, hide your thin armor there, just like any other shell type. The key to victory is blocking damage. You don't even need to learn anything new.
Well, that's
The key to victory is blocking damage. And, well, the Russian tech tree is very good at blocking damage.
That's a complete buff to the whole Russian tech tree. And how would you feel if you've got a Death Star? Wow, what a huge nerf to the whole British TD line with the big guns. That's all they have is that HE round. That's what they rely on. Wow.
not completely true. You will have to learn something new after all. The thing is that tank HE shells now penetrate obstacles just like armor-piercing shells. In the same way, they lose part of their armor penetration that equals the thickness of an obstacle.
It's
So I can
all
shoot
clear.
through that
You
hay
better
bale
talk about
now
screens and
that
tracks.
trolled me
They're
on
more
that map.
important.
If there's a screen in the way, high-explosive shells, they can penetrate it. They also may not penetrate it. It depends on armor.
This summarizes World of Tanks completely.
If there's a screen in the way, the HE shell might penetrate it. Then again, it might not. It depends on whether we want you to win or lose. At the end of game, when you're winning, it probably will penetrate. At the end of game, when you're losing, maybe not.
I'm not making this up. Guys, I'm not making this up.
If there's a screen in the way, high-explosive shells, they can penetrate it. They also may not penetrate it. It depends on armor penetration and the thickness of the screen itself. When contacting armor, HE shells cause damage in 9 cases out of 10. I checked. Same with tracks. If a shell penetrates a track but doesn't find armor behind it, it flies next to the tank. If there's armor, it causes damage. In cases when an HE shell can't penetrate a screen, there'll be no damage at all. When hitting a screen, a track, a wheel, or a module, the shell will also lose part of its armor.
So basically, you can't even use HE to reset. Like some of those games when you're down to the wire and it's 95% capped, and you're pulling and you load an HE shell because you want to reset cap, and you're not interested in doing damage. You just want to shoot the tracks so that you can get a critical hit and reset the cap. You can't even do that.
It will do no damage.
So the game will be over faster because you cannot reset. It's what? So you have to hit a weak spot with HE, and you can't hit the tracks, and it may or it may not do damage. We will decide. The game will decide, not you. What a nerf. Now, which nations benefit from HE, and which nations don't shoot that much HE because they have a lot of armor and they can shoot the 350 pen heat that they get?
Armor penetration. But unlike destructible objects, there's one important nuance. The coefficient that equals 3 is applied in the calculation. This means that a shell loses 3 times more armor penetration than the thickness of an obstacle when passing through the screen. That's why you need to fire at screens with caution.
This boring description leads us to one simple point.
Oh wait, it was boring, but we have to understand that, guys. We have to understand that.
Destructible objects, there's one important nuance. The coefficient that equals 3 is applied in the calculation. This means that a shell loses 3 times more armor penetration than the thickness of an obstacle when passing through the screen.
So if the screen is 10, it loses 30 penetration? Okay. And then it hits the next with that less penetration. So, yeah, you lose 3 times the thickness of this spaced armor or whatever.
That's why you need to fire at screens with caution.
You'll never be able to do damage to the side of an IS-7 again with HE.
This leads us to one simple point. In cases when AP shells ricochet or don't penetrate armor, the tank HE shells cause damage. And since they can penetrate screens and tracks, expose your side only if you're sure an HE shell won't get through it. In any other cases, think about consequences. But the most important thing we all gathered here for is that a heavy tank now has more confidence in its power during positional skirmishes against tanks of the same type and tier that use HE shells. Because the ephemeral but very important survival time indicator increases. And what's more enjoyable,
Did they just say that the survival time for the average tank is 4 minutes? So they want the games to be 4 minutes long? Or am I just... Do they just give us these little tidbits of information? What do you call it when you get the... you know when you're asleep and you're sleeping and they say things and then it goes in your mind, subliminal advertising. Are they saying that the games will now be 4 minutes long? Like,
skirmishes against tanks of the same type and tier that use HE shells. Because the ephemeral but very important survival time indicator increases. And what's more enjoyable, the opponent knows it. You'll last longer because it takes more shots to kill you. It went from 1.3 to 4, so basically HE shells are fucked. They're like 1/4. They're going to do 1/4. That's the ratio there. I think that's what they were trying to get across there, guys. Let's just see that again. Most important thing we all gathered here for is that a heavy tank now has more confidence in its power during positional skirmishes against tanks of the same type and tier that use HE shells.
Number of shots, 6.8. That's going to take
because
1.43 seconds to survive, right? But now with the new
ephemeral
system,
but very important survival time indicator increases. And
4 minutes. It's less than half. It's not quite a quarter. It's a little less than half. HE shells will do less than half what they did before. That's a huge
What's more
nerf.
enjoyable,
And in some cases do 0 at those critical times where you have to reset.
HE damage, they will see numbers that might inspire them to...
Or those critical times when you... Oops. When you have an enemy that's at... he's got 5 HP and you want to take him out with an HE shell. And then you shoot and sometimes they do damage. But maybe not. So, okay.
It's about another enjoyable detail. There will be no more bitter artifacts of the old mechanics when hitting the turret could lead to engine fire due to that burst radius sphere.
Now HE shells behave like the hoodlums, you know.
The hoodlums?
They're still dangerous, but there's a kind of certainty because
Bye-bye
they're your guys
T-49.
from your neighborhood.
The whole grind to get the T-49 and the Sheridan. The whole grind to get the Death Star. Out the window.
You don't want to see the facts with the stubbornness of a mouse on Prokhorovka. The mechanic of causing damage at the impact point changes a lot. You can still cause damage while not penetrating the armor.
Well, I guess it's a big buff for all the super
you can
heavies,
fire at the
which
60
were shit
TP's
to play.
turret. It's
I have
just
to say
the
that.
effectiveness
The
of
mouse,
these shots
the Type
will be
5
low.
heavy, those that were utter
Predictably
garbage
low.
to play. Maybe more
But
survivability now.
if you deliberately aim at thin armor sections and know when you should hold your horses and when to pull the trigger, the HE shells will show you a new side.
But this is the one that gets...
Continuing my genius metaphor, you want to say that the new mechanic allows for drawing the frivolous universe to your side?
Yes, speaking in your language, the result depends on you. Don't fire randomly at an enemy silhouette. Look for the spots with thin armor. You penetrate it, you cause massive damage. You don't penetrate it, no worries, they'll...
So if an object 268 version 4 is facing you, what's the thin part you're going to be looking for?
still be damage. In this case, an HE shell doesn't care about effective armor. When calculating damage upon non-penetration, only the nominal armor thickness is taken into account. The thinner it is, the higher the damage. And this means the position of the enemy doesn't matter. It's important how you fire. Additionally, you can now penetrate a track with an HE shell and cause damage to armor. Yes, this is unusual. Yes, you will have to overcome a psychological barrier. But what opportunities will open after that? And most importantly, new possibilities open up from a familiar game.
Essentially, we can get these new facts down to 3 simple points.
There's a lot of freaking changes here, guys, so they're going to get it down into 3 simple points. So let's see what the 3 simple points are. But I tell you, these are some. There's a lot of. It's going to be a shit show. You're going to take your vehicles out, and you're going to not have no idea whether you're going to do damage or not. You can shoot the side; it might do damage. It might not. You can shoot the track wheel; it will do damage.
If a shell hits the armor, it causes damage. Okay. If a shell hits a screen and doesn't penetrate it, there'll be no damage. If a shell hits a screen, penetrates it, and makes contact with armor, see point 1. The conclusion from all this is as obvious as financial advice given to aspiring billionaires.
Aspiring billionaires, like wargaming owners. Basically screens. The only thing that will stop HE now are screens. So if you have a screen, you can stop HE. Like that little picket fence in front of the STRV, I guess will stop HE, and the little screen on the Super Conqueror, and those little Russian tanks with the side screens. And then there will be a whole new Russian tank line introduced that has screens. It'll be the new highly mobile double-barreled screen tanks.
Don't shoot at a screen you can't penetrate. Cut this piece of the video with your scissors.
Don't shoot at a screen. Mark my words, guys. There's going to be a Russian screen
combat
tank
situations
line.
in new realities. Now it's clear when you don't hit armor, don't penetrate a screen or a track. And the improved penetration indicator works with HE shells more accurately. Red color means there'll be no damage. Yellow means damage won't be full damage. Green means penetration with full damage.
Previously, there was usually no point in firing HE shells at the mouse's side from many calibers, and now there are options, and they remind you of those you have had when using armor-piercing shells. Resetting a base capture or finishing of a massive opponent with almost no HP left are no longer a feat, but a common occurrence.
The characteristics...
What do you mean? If you shoot 8, they just said it's a... If there's a guy in a cap with 4 HP and you happen to shoot and don't penetrate, you'll do 0. You won't reset. You're screwed. I see a KV2. Let's see, what's happened to the KV2?
Of a number of vehicles with HE gameplay were improved so that they feel more comfortable in the new conditions, and you enjoy playing in them as much as you did before. At the same time, the test showed that wheeled vehicles demonstrated...
They buffed the KV2. They've buffed the KV2. Dispersion during movement, less. Dispersion, less. Aiming time, less. Engine power, increase. Traverse speed, increase. They buffed the KV. They just glanced past that, guys. They just went past that.
But a common occurrence.
The characteristics of a number of vehicles with HE gameplay were improved so that they feel more comfortable in the new conditions, and you enjoy playing in them as much as you did.
They buffed the Type 5 Heavy, the Sheridan, and the KV2. They increased the horsepower of the KV2 engine by 40 horsepower. They decreased the aim time. The KV2 stats are better than the Type 5 Heavy stats.
Before. At the same time, the test showed that wheeled vehicles demonstrated excessive combat effectiveness. That's why armor penetration of their HE shells was reduced to 75mm, which has become a standard value for the whole branch.
We could talk forever about the numbers,
won't penetrate as
but
much.
let's
That's
get
good.
this straight. High explosive damage has remained high explosive damage, frightening and extremely enjoyable. But you don't need to wait for that very moment now. You can create it yourself. This is about awareness. It's in your hands.
It's not in my hands. Guys,
World
it's
of
not in
Tanks
my
has
hands.
been constantly changing.
It's
All
in
this is a
Wargaming's
new
hands.
cycle of game evolution. Artillery now has more choices. 3 shells help it better react to the changes during battle.
Artillery has
In a
3
natural
shit
manner,
shells.
they
now.
also decreased the amount of stun in battles. The comfort of gameplay in tanks, especially heavy tanks, has increased, in
is
particular
true.
due to the tools to counter SPG, while the revamped HE shells provide the feeling of controlling the situation, which would previously sound like nonsense. And this is what it's all about. It's never going to be like it was.
Basically, that's it, guys. It's never going to be as it was. That's the perfect ending to the video. It's never going to be as it was. It's World of Tanks as we knew it is gone and is gone forever. Basically, okay, SPGs have been nerfed to shit. You'll know where they are. You'll know when they shoot. You'll get warned when they shoot. They'll do less stun. They've given you useless shells that some stupid people will load and shoot. You know, some people will load AP and shoot, miss, and do 0. They have the second shell that doesn't do any stun. The stunning shells do less stun. So SPGs are just fucked completely. HE shells have been shit on completely. So all of the lines that relied on HE shells have been screwed. The British TDs, the T-49, the Sheridan, the Type 5 Heavy, if you're going to use the derp gun, any derp shooting one, except guaranteed that the KV2 will still roll 900 and 1,000 when it shoots some people. Guaranteed. We'll have to play it and see. So everything's nerfed. Everything is nerfed. HE and SPGs. The big winners are tanks that have armor that will be harder to penetrate with HE. So they will take less damage. And that is basically all the heavy tanks, you know, the Mouse, the E100, the Type 5 Heavy, the Polish heavies, some of the big heavy tanks, all buffed. But the thing a lot of people forget is that because, for instance, the EBRs, the HE pen is dropped to 76. Well, the whole Russian line, light tanks, medium tanks, they all have more than 76 millimeters of armor. So like an EBR 105 now will have trouble penning a T-54 lightweight, right? So all the Russian lightly armored, I use lightly in quotation marks, lightly armored, meaning lighter than the heavy tanks, but still enough armor that the whole bottom half, the lightly armored half of the Russian tech tree, completely buffed, right? The light tanks and the medium tanks completely buffed. And some of the more heavily armored, like the Chinese tanks and some of the more heavily armored German mediums. The Leopard line, not so much. The E50 line, maybe a little better towards HE. It's something we're going to have to learn as we go and just see how it plays out when it comes. It's hard to know exactly what's going to happen, but my prediction is a big buff for the lightly armored Russian tanks, huge nerf for the British, the whole British line that relies on HE and Hesh, especially the Death Star. The Death Star has died. I'm sorry to say, guys, the once proud super Death Star British tank, dead. No point grinding to the T-49 if you want to use the derp gun. You want to drive around with the accuracy of that gun. You're gonna hit a weak spot. No, you're gonna drive by, auto lock, and blast them. Right? And sometimes you're gonna do 0 damage. So that line, nerf to shit. Some of the tier 8 premium tanks that rely on a really good HE shell. There's the Hawk and the Girlfriend Bulldog, the German ones that have 105 pen on their HE. You're not going to pen, you're going to do 0 a lot. So, remind you which is the Death Star? The Death Star is this whole line, right? Has been completely and totally, utterly nerfed. Nerf. Because you look at the gun and you rely on 230 pen, what do they call it? The regular HE has 92 pen, 1750 damage. You'll never pen anymore. Sometimes you'll do 0. Like you'll shoot the Death Star with the regular cheap HE, and if the armor's more than 92, your 1750 damage gun will roll 0. So if there's a hull down IS-7 there, you'll do 0, and you'll have to load Hesh that has 230 pen, and you'll fire it at a hull down IS-7, and you won't pen the turret, and you'll do 0. Like, wow. Just say goodnight tonight to the British tech tree, guys. But that's all I got. Leave some comments. Let me know what you guys think. It was a long one, but I'll catch you on the next one.